Good morning. Welcome to Expo West 2025. Woo! It's starting. I think I was figuring it out. This is 20 for me. Anybody else 20? Probably all my friends. Yeah, 20? Good. 10? 10 expos? At least 10? Awesome. It's been a long time. All right, let's dive in. Welcome. We're here to talk about purpose today. And I want to start with the most significant event in my life. So when I was 6 years old, my father found out that the cancer he had been battling for many years was terminal. And he only had a couple of years left to live. So here's this 6-year-old boy, 27-year-old dad. He decided right then and there that he would pour his life experience into his only son. In his mind, he had a couple of years to do this. And so he took that
we can see.
charge personally and attacked it with purpose.
What do you think?
So for me, at 6, of course, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the lessons that my dad taught me during that period and then ongoing throughout my life were extremely impactful for me. So he taught me many, many lessons, but 3 themes really stood out. Number 1, son, if you're going to do it, make sure you do it right. Take the time, slow down, and do it right. Number 2, be bold in everything you do. My dad would go to my soccer games and woo, woo, woo. He didn't care. He was the one cheering and the loudest, and he just didn't care. He was bold. And the last one was make a difference. Find a way to make a difference. All this from my 27-year-old dad, right? I remember being knee-deep in the Triumph Spitfire that my dad loved. Grease up to the elbows, working on the car, him showing me how to do the oil change. Slow down. We're going to do this right.
It's not a sponsor of Climate Day. No.
Do it right.
Okay.
I'm a drummer. Any other drummers? Yeah? Even a drum circle? Right? So I'm a little older than most of you in here probably, but there's a guy named Peter Criss from a band called Kiss. He was my idol as a very young kid. And so when I was putting on the cat makeup for Halloween, he was right there with me, making sure I did it right? Like, and I'm going to be bold. He was like, lean in and do it, be bold, right? And I remember at a very young age, he asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I'm going to be a garbage man. Why do you want to be a garbage man? Well, they get to hang off the back of trucks and wear gloves all day. What's better than that, right? And my dad would always say, hey, son, you want to be a garbage man, just make sure you're making a difference in that community. Like, understand why you're doing it. Make a difference. He was full of these things, and it was amazing for me to grow up with him, and I honor him every day in everything that I try to do. So why am I telling you this story? I believe to my core that the significant events that we have as human beings on this earth, whether they're full of joy and celebration, or whether they're really painful and you don't have a clue why it happened to you, these significant events make up who we are, and they set us on our purpose. I believe that to my core, and I want you just to come on this journey with me and try to believe it for yourself as well, okay? So see if you can tap into one of those significant events right now. Maybe it's the one you don't want to think about, or maybe it's the one that brings you the most joy. But I firmly believe that significant events are one way to start to drive towards purpose. And my goal today is to take you on a journey where you can articulate your purpose, and not only articulate it, but feel the power of it, and harness that power, and do something big in the world. The biggest thing you can do is to be fulfilled, especially at work, okay? So you ready to go on this journey with me? All right, let's do it. So this is my definition of a purpose. A purpose is a clear and compelling reason for being that drives you to make a meaningful impact in the world, aligning your values, passions, and actions toward a significant goal. It is your why. It is not what you do. It is not how you do it. It's not even your title. It's the why you do it. How many times have you been asked, why do you exist? Probably not very many, okay? It's a scary question, right? Like, how do you dive into that question? That is a scary question for some folks. Why do you even exist? Why? The point I want to make about this definition, though, is that it's about you making a meaningful difference. It's about your impact on the world. It's about your why. Okay? We meet lots of folks who are on purpose, lots of founders. I work with founders every day in my job, in my day job. Founders in particular, entrepreneurs, founders, these folks are on purpose. Get out of my way, I'm going to get something done, right? We meet these folks. You probably work for one. If you're in this industry, you probably work for that founder. But I'm here to ask you, why not you? How do you connect in with your own purpose and make a meaningful difference each and every day, a difference that'll bring fulfillment and impact into your own life? All right? So I'm going to ask you this question many, many times today over the next hour that we're together. How clear are you on your personal purpose? If you were to have to answer the question, I exist to blank, could you answer the question? Yeah, some of you are nodding. It takes some work, right? I'm also here to convince you that purpose is energy and it is fuel. When you plug into it, it's like an electric light socket, full of energy. And by the end of this hour, I'm hoping that you're able to articulate your purpose, even a little bit, version 1.0. It's kind of an iterative process. And you can plug into the energy that comes in with purpose, comes to you with purpose. We're going to interview some folks. We're going to dive deep into this today, all right? So just so I know what we're working with, how many of you, raise your hand high, already know your purpose and you're on it and you're living it every day and you could articulate it?
Do I recall?
Sweet.
You're going to cue me when to
It's
go?
going to be an easy one, all right? How many of you might still be trying to figure it out? You're kind of on a journey around it? Awesome. And how many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? All right, good. I can tell you this is the most purpose-driven industry I know of on the planet. So it doesn't shock me, okay? So what I'm hopeful to do is to help you not only articulate your purpose, but really harness it and figure out ways to harness it and use it every single day, all right? You with me on this? Let me show you a construct. Most of us here in the natural products industry want to work for a company that's making a big difference in the world. I call it stage 3, radiating impact. How many of you would say you work for a company that's radiating impact? They have impact on their employees, they have impact on their stakeholders, their supply chain, right? They're radiating impact. Their investors are like-minded. They're in alignment. This is the goal. That's the orange circle to your right, okay? That's the farthest out there, stage 3. I call it stage 3, radiating impact. It doesn't start there. If we back up one from stage 3 to stage 2, we talk about scaling your business purpose, scaling the business why. How do you scale your why as a business? But I'm here to also tell you that stage 1 is likely the most important stage. The other stages don't happen. I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, hundreds of founders, hundreds of CEOs. The ones that understand their personal purpose and have harnessed it, they've harnessed that energy for the focus that they need and the drive, because starting a business or leading a team is not easy. It's not easy to do these things. So when you're on purpose and you know exactly why you exist, and you can hold that up as your North Star and harness that energy and drive that focus, then you can do stage 2 more effectively, scale your business impact. Then the business can radiate purpose, stage 3. Can everybody get there with me on that? Okay. I would also like to introduce you to yourself around being a business owner. If you're in this room, you're likely a leader within your company. And whether you're the founder or the CEO, you own your business. Can you put that hat on? It's not necessarily just a job. If it's a job for you, please find something else to do. Okay? But if you're in a business that's making some impact, and you are a part of that leadership team, you own a part of that business, whether it's logistics or marketing or even digital marketing, up and down the organization. And so what I wanted you to do is invite you to take that on and really own that for yourself as we talk about purpose. Once you plug into stage 1, your personal purpose, you can help your business accelerate even farther and faster. Make sense? I've worked with entrepreneur after entrepreneur that expresses this. My first entrepreneur I ever met was a guy named Jordan down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. He had Crohn's before anybody knew what Crohn's was. He was selling little black baggies of, people thought was dirt, and he was making a lot of money on it. I met him, and he was on purpose. He wanted to empower extraordinary health. He wanted everyone to get these health benefits, and I followed him on that journey. I've got a client who is an NFL lineman, a very, very good NFL lineman, high performance. He understood what it meant to be in the NFL, feel that high performance. He started a company now that's all about democratizing high performance, and he lives it and feels it. He is the guy. He's connected, right? We all know Yvon Chouinard and his story. Let My People Go Surfing, if you ever read the book, of course. Every entrepreneur that you can track this back to has done this. They know how to connect into their personal purpose, right? So I want to invite you to do the same thing. If you were to take just a second right now, and I encourage you, pull out your phones, pull out something to write on, go on this journey with me today over the next 48 minutes or so. Go on this journey with me and see if we can't hone this together. So if you were to take a shot at your personal purpose today, right now, a couple of words, let me remind you, your personal purpose should answer the question, why? Why do I exist? Not who do I do it for, not what do I do, not how do I do it. It's the why. Okay, so if you were to answer this question for you and fill in just a couple of words, 2 or 3 words, I exist to, what comes to mind for you? Write it down, okay? Go on this journey with me. All right? Good. So let's get inspired by Paul Lightfoot, right? So I want to show you what this looks like in action. I'm going to spend some time. Come on up, Paul. This is Paul Lightfoot, the general manager from Patagonia Provisions. Help me welcome Paul. Good to see you, man.
Hey, Rob.
How's it going? Yeah, please. Got my notes here, handy dandy notes. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We're here talking about purpose.
Yes.
How does that show up for you?
Do you want me to answer the question?
Yes, please.
I didn't have to think about it. I've written it down for myself many times. I exist to transform the food system for the sake of human health and for the sake of the planet's health.
Wow. Pretty tight. How'd this all start? You started off as a Wall Street lawyer, correct? You look just like a Wall Street lawyer to me.
I was very briefly a Wall Street lawyer.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted things when I was young that were not actually the things that I wanted.
Can you say more? How did you know you didn't want it? Like, what was the...
When I was there? So I went to this giant Wall Street law firm, a truly soulless organization. I mean, I learned a lot. It wasn't a bad experience, but it was very hard to get the job. And the people who made partner after 10 years was less than 10%. And I thought, well, these are terrible odds. I don't think I'm good enough for that, right? Just typical imposter syndrome. And I realized after a year, the very best in my class left to do something else. And I thought, if Doug Chase left, maybe I'm misunderstanding what this game is. And then I just started really just looking around, and the people running the place, the partners, were super unhealthy, unhappy. None of them were in a first marriage. None of them seemed to have good relationships with their kids. And I thought, this is a shitty place to make a career.
That's great awareness for a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what'd you do with that?
I was so busy and so focused on succeeding at it, which was, occasionally sleep under your desk sort of stuff. It was really, really intense, that I didn't do anything until an outside event sort of changed it. My father, I also had a father die young, not as young as yours. So when I was 20, he had been dying for a long time, very slowly. But then all of a sudden, he was going to die, within a few months. I was in New York, my family was in California, and my mother called and said, you should think about how you want to be there for the end. Not for his sake, he's not going to necessarily know, but you're going to care how you showed up. And I just kept thinking about that, and I thought, I'm not going to show up at all. I'm working so much and so intensely that I'm not going to be there. And I decided right there to just leave. I thought, I'm a fungible cog in a world of fungible law firms and lawyers. It doesn't matter. I'm in this club, I can get back in it. And I just took a leave of absence, came out to California. And while I was there, I thought, I'm not going to go back to that. And it was while the dot-com boom was just booming, and I thought, well, that looks really exciting. And so I started an internet company back when there were very few internet companies.
I'm on that trail with you. Yeah, it was fun back then, right?
It was for a while.
I just started a company.
For a while. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
So I just made something up.
Yeah. And so there was an energy driving you there, right?
There was a willingness to take risk. I had a bike that wasn't very valuable and a rent-stabilized apartment and no debt, no assets, no wife. It was just a great time to, set sail.
Right. And how'd that .com lead you to Bright Farms?
Oh, boy. The .com was wildly successful and then failed wildly. The Wall Street Journal talked about how smart I was.
Yeah.
And 18 months later, they talked about how stupid I was. I was the same guy, by the way. But, the world perceived me differently before and after.
Yeah.
It was right after I was turning 30 that it ended. Someone had been watching me and asked me to come lead an enterprise software company that he owned that was a true mess. It was such a messy business. And I did that for almost 10 years. And that was really where I learned during my 30s, where I sort of grew up as a business person. Quarter after quarter, top and bottom line growth. No raised capital. It was all of our costs were funded by our AR from our clients, who were middle market retailers for the most part. And it was a decent career, but I was still missing something. Remember when I was a lawyer, it was pretty easy to see that it was a bad place to be. During my 30s, it was harder for me to see that running a software company didn't have enough for me, but I could feel it growing. And I was a really zealous food guy. Like in the way I fed myself and my family, my identity as a parent was very closely tied to food that was both healthy and good for the environment. And by the time I was nearing the end of my 30s, I thought, I want to do that. Like that's what I want to be spending my work on and my time and pouring my resources into. Mm-hmm. And I just came up with an idea for Bright Farms. I come up with a lot of ideas, are not that hard to come by. I gave the idea to someone that I thought might do it, and he said, it's a good idea, but he's like, I don't think I can raise capital. I don't think I can sell things to retailers. Right. And I thought, well, those are the things that I do. And I just went home to my wife and said, I'm almost 40, let's have a startup again.
Here we go.
Yeah, and she said no, by the way.
Of course, yeah, I know that experience too.
Because then I had 3 kids and a mortgage and, fancier bikes.
Yeah. You called yourself a zealous food guy.
Yeah.
There's an energy that makes you want to go home and tell your wife with the 3 kids that, hey, we're scrapping everything, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah. And
you called yourself a zealous food guy. I'm wondering where that came from. There's a thread there, right? Like, how did you become a zealous food guy?
I don't know. My 18-year-old son is a busboy in a restaurant right now, and I worked in restaurants all during high school, all during college, all during law school. And I don't know why. I remember in college I would be the guy cooking for my housemates. It wasn't from my parents. I don't know where it came from actually.
Wow.
I just know that by the time I was in my mid-30s, I sort of knew that's one of the things I cared most
about. It was innate.
And by the way, many of you probably feel the way about food as well. It's really important for your health. So maybe, it's just sort of, maybe it's because my dad had been chronically ill for most of my life.
Wow. So it was innate.
You tell me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I'm telling you, yeah. So the experience at Bright Farms, what did it teach you? Where did it lead you?
So Bright Farms, I don't know if many of you know it, it didn't have a presence on the West Coast. It grew salads and greenhouses up and down, well, still does, up and down the East Coast and the Midwest. It's now owned by Cox Enterprise, the big Atlantic conglomerate. It was a hard business, which in my experience has been most of my businesses.
Sure.
Super disruptive. We went after the Salinas salad industry, which we thought had some supply chain obstacles that were sort of structurally going to get worse, and we were right. And we went to retailers and basically partnered with them to build local, commercial scale local produce essentially. It taught me how to raise money on a bigger scale, raise hundreds of millions of dollars. It taught me how to partner with major supermarket chains on a really close but also scaled way. It taught me how to grow up as a leader. Backstage we were talking about my leadership philosophies. That was when I honed the things that I had trialed in my 30s. This was my 40s, right? Mm-hmm. And it also taught me that I really, really wanted to be in food. I wanted to be proud of the food that I made, and I wanted to be proud of the impact that the food was making in the world. And during that journey, I learned, and this was sort of happenstance, like a soccer dad in my community and I both were not focused on regenerative agriculture. And over the course of my 40s, I determined that was probably where I should spend the rest of my career, which led me to initiate a long and careful transition out of Bright Farms. Hired my successor, we sold the company, and here I am.
Yeah. And so lots of ups and downs in growing a company like that.
It was like a series of existential crises that ended well. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of a purpose at that point? I find that some people are just unconscious. You were conscious.
Very
right?
conscious. Wrote it down, put it on the wall. Yeah.
And did it serve as that energy driver for you to kind of push through? Like,
Very, very clearly and intentionally. Yeah, I would hire people for their values. Yes.
right,
Not just about it, but
right. And so now you've landed at Patagonia, of course. It seems like a perfect place. Tell me how you're expressing purpose there today. How's that looking for you?
well, maybe I'll start with while I was the exit from Bright Farms was very careful, which is a euphemism for slow. Like, the acquirer and I agreed that we were going to do it in a way that was very low risk. It just went on for a long time
Right.
by design, but which is an unnatural feeling as an entrepreneur. I'm like, let's go. And it gave me the chance to write a newsletter, to really think about what I wanted to do next. And a recruiter called me with this opportunity right at the end of that process, which was perfect timing, as you can imagine. And Patagonia had written like an 8-page PDF about their vision for a food business. And it was uncannily the same as a thesis I had written for myself. And it was a niche thesis, like no one else was even talking about it. And I'm a big snow sports guy, I'm a big outdoors enthusiast. And when I only loved one brand already before I got this call, and it was Patagonia.
100%.
And so when I got the call, read that PDF, thought about it, I had 1,000 interviews. It's a very slow hiring place, and every one of them I ended by saying, I'm not playing hard to get. I'm ready to go. I will move. All 3 kids will change school. We'll move across the country. We'll sell both houses. My wife will change jobs, and
Let's go.
We did all that. Yeah,
And that electricity between your personal purpose and that business purpose was real, palpable.
still is.
And I did some research. If we could put the slides back up real quick. I did some research and found your old manifesto. How old is this? How long ago did you write this?
So I had been writing a newsletter about regenerative agriculture and the power of brands to be demand magnets for transforming farmland. And this was an edition of that newsletter that I think was in October of 2021. I went on a retreat that was about finding like the vision for what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Right.
And during that, I wrote a manifesto and hit send on the newsletter, and I haven't seen this in years. But the first line is the same thing I said earlier, right?
Yep.
So I'm still following that.
That's so good. Yeah. What advice do you have for folks who are maybe they've tapped into their purpose and they need to really harness it to push forward, or maybe they're trying to explore what their purpose might be? What kind of advice might you give?
I'm always reluctant to give advice. We're all different, but I will.
Sure.
You're all in food, right? And presumably, if you're thinking about purpose, you're thinking about either health or environmental impact. At least I hope many of you are, because that's one of the key levers that food can be used for. I just encourage everyone to do a little bit like Yvon Chouinard has always done, which is to just keep asking questions about where things come from. And in food in particular, a lot of people aren't really awake to the fact that food that's produced with synthetic fertilizer is made from fossil fuels. It's made from synthetic fertilizer, made from natural gas, so it's fossil food. So like that's my first advice, like keep asking where things come from, and don't be afraid to say to yourself, I'm dissatisfied with a part of the story. One of the things I like about Patagonia is that we don't make lists of the things we're proud of and happy and talk about them out loud. We make lists of things that we're dissatisfied with, and then we focus on those things. And you never hear us put out a press release saying we're doing great, And I think the second bit of advice I'd give, and I think this is really useful, is that you can be paid well in a company that does good things, and you can be paid well in a company that does bad things. You're going to be happier if you choose the one that does good things. Working in a way all day long that's consistent with your values and makes you proud of the fruits of your labor is just a happier way to go through life. And you'll be happier the way you talk to your kids and your neighbors, be a little bit more righteous at cocktail parties. It's better.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time, Paul. Great stuff.
My pleasure, Ron.
You're an
Thank you.
inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Help me thank Paul appropriately.
Thank you.
Thanks. So again, I ask you, why do you exist? Maybe Paul was inspiring for you. Take a minute, write down a couple things that comes to mind for you. Did you feel that energy? Did you see his manifesto? Have you ever written something like that down? Like, there's some energy in that. There's some real energy. And I've experienced this one sentence, I exist too, whatever that is for you, as a real core source of that energy and focus. It becomes a North Star that you can kind of align everything to. Does that make sense? So for the next few minutes, let's dig into a little more inspiration around how you might really harness your personal purpose. So for some inspiration, here's several people you might know. Oprah, she says her purpose is to be a teacher and to be known for inspiring my students to be more than they thought they could be. Can you feel that why? There's a why there, right? Larry Page to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. He and Sergey Brin probably didn't have the same purpose, but they coalesced behind a purpose that became Google. And I think they're doing this pretty well. Love or hate their practices, they're on purpose, right? Mark Zuckerberg, he's all about the power of community and bringing the world closer together. Do you feel the why? Bringing the world closer together? There's a why there. Elon Musk, love him or hate him, he's on purpose when it comes to making life interplanetary, multiplanetary. I don't know about the X thing, okay? Can't connect that one. But all of his previous companies are all about getting man to Mars, making life multiplanetary. Like I said, love him or hate him, the man is on purpose. Steve Jobs, all those words, and then to make a dent in the universe. Love that, right? I firmly believe that if you harness your personal purpose, anyone can make a small or giant dent in the universe, right? And then Brene Brown, to help people live more authentically and embrace vulnerability as a source of strength. All very different, all have different and varying degrees of energy, okay? So again, I'm going to keep asking you these questions. What are those 2 words? What are those 3 words that you might be filling in the blank with right about now? What's coming to mind for you? All right? There's some work you can do around this. This is a simple approach. There's a lot of work you can do to really harness your purpose. I love this one. I don't know if I'm saying it right or even if it's the right definition, but ikigai, any Japanese here? Right? Ikigai, Japanese term that basically means the reason for being is what I understand. And this is how they map that out. Ikigai is right in the middle. It sits right in the middle of what you love to do. If you had to roll out of bed every day at 4:30 a.m. and do something all day, what would give you a smile jumping out of bed at 4:30? What is that thing that you love to do? What the world needs. Maybe you're really passionate about plastic, or you're really passionate about pets or animals, or really passionate about something that your community needs locally. What fires you up? Maybe it's education, anything. That's that whole concept of what the world needs right now. Going back to those significant events in your life, if you harness those significant events, I think it'll point to something that you think the world needs, right? So if you were to jot down a few things on what the world needs right now that you are really passionate about, what might that be? What are you good at? When you show up and people ask you to do something because they know you're going to nail it, what is it? What is it people are asking you to do because it's so easy for you and you wonder why it's not easier for other people? And then in the Ikigai world, what can I be paid for? I firmly believe that if you harness these other 3 things, and understand it in a big way and start talking about it, allowing that energy to flow for yourself around the other 3 things, why you exist, the job will materialize. Think about Paul. Here's an on-purpose human being who landed at probably the most on-purpose company on the planet, right? He manifested that. Firmly believe it, 100%. So these three things, and then what can you be paid for, kind of all meet in the middle, ikigai, a reason for being. Why do I exist, right? Here's another approach that we use in our workbook, which I'll invite you guys to at the end of the speech. We've got a workbook on how to uncover your personal purpose. We talk about I'm on purpose when I'm using my gifts of X, Y, and Z while doing these things that I get called to do, with the intention to result in something, okay? So if you're gonna fill in these blanks, it starts to point you towards your purpose, all right? So here's how I fill in my blanks. I'm on purpose when I use my gifts of vision, storytelling, and strategic thinking while inspiring, equipping, and connecting leaders. These are the things that I do with the intention to result in scalable impact, thriving businesses, and radical evolution of capitalism. I run a company called Scale Passion. Our purpose at Scale Passion is radically evolving capitalism. We are aiming towards capitalism 3.0, and we want to be a major lever in the move towards hitting 3.0. Not 2.0 Milton Friedman, 3.0, okay? That's why we exist. That's the purpose that we harness. So you can see how this starts poking on that, right? It starts to push towards that. So I then bring that all down to my I exist to statement, I exist to, and I boiled that down over many, many years of working on this to scale impact. My two words are scale impact. I want to scale impact personally for you as a leader and for your company, with the result being stage 3, radiating impact, right? And if we get enough leaders and enough companies doing this, guess what will result? Capitalism 3.0, radically evolving capitalism. That's how I plug in, okay? That's the way I plug in. Now, let's talk to Courtney Pinot of the Climate Collaborative. She's the executive director. Come on up, Courtney. And we're going to find out how another leader might harness her purpose. Hi, Courtney.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good to see
How are
you. Thanks.
All right. I have known you for quite a long time.
A long time, yeah.
And I experience you as always working for a company that's on purpose. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
I think I discovered at a really young age that I wanted to be working in alignment with kind of my soul's calling, I guess. And that's continued to evolve. But I think now, particularly through some of the work, and I'm happy to share a little bit more about this, the work that we've been doing at the Climate Collaborative, I've become more and more clear that really my core purpose is around helping people experience and live into our collective potential to create transformational change in the world. And I think it's come through over and over again in my career, but it's only been actually relatively recently that I understood some of the nuances around that.
You said my soul's purpose.
Yeah.
What do you think that came from?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this since you and I talked before, and I think for me, a lot of it came out of how I grew up. So I grew up in a big family in Baltimore, Maryland, and one of the things that was kind of unique about my family is that there was a lot of love in the household, but there was this really interesting quality of almost essentially being kind of like cloistered off from the world. And there were these adages that were said in our household all the time as I was growing up. And they sound kind of heavy to say them on stage, but things like, nobody's your friend, or everybody will stab you in the back, you can't trust anybody. And I think at a really young age, I never bought into that. Like I had this very visceral experience of like the energy of that. And I just never really bought in. I just remember hearing it and kind of being like, whatever. And then I had these opportunities when I was probably a teenager to start working in all of this movement building work. And some of it was like Amnesty International or Greenpeace or other types of environmental movements. And there was this, again, this visceral quality of like, oh my gosh, this is what I want more of, right? Like there was this feeling of warmth and being at home with this community of working together collectively to make the world a better place. And I just knew, I was like, whatever this is what I want to be doing in my life.
You mentioned visceral quality, feeling. There's kind of a body thing.
There's a somatic feeling to it.
Yeah.
There's definitely a somatic feeling
Very
to it.
somatic. Yeah. How is that expressing across your career, you can probably draw a line. Well, let me ask you what I asked Paul. Was this conscious for you, or was it more unconscious, kind of an unconscious thread that was kind of leading you from non-GMO, I mean, all the different things that you've touched on? Was it conscious for you, like it was for Paul, or was it more unconscious?
I think in some levels it was conscious, in some levels it was unconscious. So I knew that I wanted to be working with a mission-driven food company. I never thought like, oh, I'm going to go work for a certification. But I was definitely bought into the purpose of the Non-GMO Project. I mean, when you and I met, this orientation around people having transparency in terms of the food that they were eating, I could really buy into that. And one of the things that we used to talk about that, again, I think aligns with my orientation towards being in service to our planet is, at that time, it was around protecting the integrity of our seed supply. And for me, that was very near and dear to my heart. And so we were a very purpose-driven organization. And one of the things that was so unique about the Non-GMO Project that has helped inform my work is that we got to see, and I mean, you were there for this, you and I were working together on this, is that there was this collective potential of people coming together, and you had distribution and retailers and CPG and consumers. And here we were like this little teeny team of just a couple of people, similar to the Climate Collaborative. And yet the impact, not that we were having as an organization, but the movement was having together was really profound. And when I experienced that, I was like, this could be applied many other places, and I want to be doing this. I want to be doing this kind of movement building work.
Yeah.
So I think that has continued to stay really true for me.
Yeah, that brings up, like, we worked with competition. Like, I was the one calling competition, we were calling folks, and it created a bond between competition that was way bigger than just competing, and we were making a movement together.
Yep.
And so this industry is ripe for that,
Yeah.
that kind of partnership and competition.
Yeah.
Much like me, I think my purpose, for example, when I worked for Garden of Life, I didn't know it then, it was unconscious, but I can draw a thread back to scaling impact.
Right.
Where Jordan was more about health, right? And so I think for you as well, you've touched on different kinds of movements, but there was a thread that was your personal purpose.
Right.
And the point I want to make is you can have a personal purpose that plugs in with somebody else's purpose, right?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I think that, like I said, there's like layers to it. And one of the things that I really value about the work at the Climate Collaborative is that my associate director and I, Caitlin Olson, we're really oriented towards learning. We happen to have access to incredible teachers like the late Carol Sanford, Otto Scharmer, who will be speaking today. And I think that we have this orientation towards this recognition that collaboration is critical to accelerating climate action at scale. But the form that takes, like when we talk about collective potential, it is nuanced. Like we're learning, we're continuing to kind of like hold ourselves accountable to like, how can we do this better? And for us, like collaboration is just thrown around all the time. And I think that we equate it oftentimes with partnership, but really for us, it's not only like the outcome of the work, but it's the very nature of the work itself, like how we're working together, how we're bringing company, like what you did with the supplement working group. It's like, how do you bring competitors into the room, and then how do you create the conditions for something to emerge that maybe nobody ever expected? And I think that's really cool. That's a really cool thing to have happen.
That's so good. It makes me think about collective purpose and how each of the folks in the collective have their individual purpose. So, and we're plugging in different ways, but there's a common thread.
Totally.
You see what I mean, there's a thread. As a leader, do you think about your team's purpose? Like, I mean, I'm trying to make this more conscious for folks.
Yeah,
You see what I
sure.
mean? It's largely unconscious. We can connect in with it energetically, but I just wonder, like, when you're on your team, you think about Caitlin, you think about other people on your team, I bet you could spot their purpose or say, you could probably call it out even if you haven't done the work to really harness it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do think about it, and we have language that seems to work really well for us, which is oftentimes when we're looking at an opportunity in front of us, of course, we have to evaluate for all the things that any of us that are in businesses have to evaluate for, like the impact on our bottom line or our engagement metrics. But there's this question that we oftentimes ask ourselves, which actually came out of some of the work that we've done with Renourish Studio, which came out of Carol Sanford's work. And there's this question about like, does this increase my will? And for us, this idea that like your will is really driven by being in alignment with your purpose and your essence. And also that for us, because our mission happens to align with that, then it becomes a really good kind of metric, essentially, to assess, like, is this something that is lifting up our energy that we really feel drawn to moving into? And we use that language all the time because there will be opportunities that come up where it's like, this seems like a good opportunity, we could do this, but is this actually our work to do? And sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah, I love how, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a real intention around the personal purpose, and then there's the business purpose and making sure that it's connected.
Yeah.
And that's where the energy is. It's huge energy.
Yeah, and we talk about that with our board. I mean, the board, I think we're really blessed to have a board that's also really in alignment with our core beliefs. We did a lot of work when I first joined the Climate Collaborative to really challenge some of the assumptions that were actually some of the foundation of the organization, and kind of coming to the board and saying like, wow, we were founded on this, but here are some of the things that we believe, and we're curious about continuing to evolve kind of our theory of change and why we exist as an organization, and that's ongoing.
Climate Collaborative is, and many of the other organizations you've worked for, is putting out into the world a very clear version of why you exist, which is attracting the right people.
Right.
So not to put you on the spot, but throughout your career, it doesn't have to be Climate Collaborative, but have you ever had a person that was on the team that didn't fit the purpose?
Definitely.
And can you talk a little bit about that, maybe how, talk a little bit about that, maybe how you handled that as a leader, as a leader of an organization and what that means?
Yeah, I probably have had more experiences like that when I was at the Non-GMO Project. One of the things, and I know you've probably experienced this, is that when you have a really young organization, I was the third full-time employee at the Non-GMO Project. In the early days, like we were all deeply, deeply engaged in the work. And I think for us, like we could, again, going back to that visceral quality, there was like a part of us, we would just show up. It didn't matter if like you need to take the garbage out or you need to be setting up a booth. We were willing to commit ourselves fully. And as the organization grew, you started to see that people were showing up and it was more of a job. And I think what ended up happening is that oftentimes people kind of self-select. Like it's just, it doesn't really align, and they're going to continue to chase something that probably pays better or is less work. And in other cases, there really was an opportunity to have a difficult conversation, which is this the right role for you? Yeah. And I think as a leader, we need to be willing to have those difficult conversations of, this doesn't really feel like a good match, and maybe there's an opportunity for you to reflect on that and us to reflect on that and then see, like, are we continuing to show up?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that the health of the tribe depends on those conversations. I'm also a big believer that everyone has a purpose that'll connect somewhere.
Right. Oh, sure.
And I love you too much to let you stay here because it's not connecting with ours, right? So go do your work, go find it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for folks who are poking around at this or trying to make the unconscious more conscious or trying to harness it even more? Are there any watch outs you would tell folks who are in this journey?
I would say that there's this, I don't know if I wouldn't call it a tool, but there's something that we say in our household that just tends to work really well for me, which is we oftentimes talk about breadcrumbs, like following the breadcrumbs, and that I believe that the universe really wants us to be living into our purpose, right? And that really when you start to get on that path, it's like there are these breadcrumbs in front of you. And my husband's here in the room, he works in the industry as well, and we oftentimes will say, it'll just be like a passing thing. Like, for instance, I'm very, very passionate about bees, and I look to bees as teachers, and something will come up about bees, and like he'll look over at me and just say like breadcrumb, and it's like those breadcrumbs oftentimes are right around us, and it's amazing how that energy starts to build. And I think starting to attune to that and letting it just continue to kind of let you know that you're on the right path.
Love it. Last question. How would you fill out the blank, I exist to?
Well, in thinking about it, I mean, to be really candid, it's kind of an evolution of my purpose, which is really, I feel like I exist to be in service to our incredible planet. And it sounds like that's very like work focused, but I mean it in like every sense of the term, like in terms of play and energy, and it just, when the work is hard, it lifts me up so much. And I think we are so, so blessed to live in a planet that's just full of abundance and mystery and love, and that feeds me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of lots of folks, thank you for the impact you've had on this industry and for your inspiration.
Well,
Really
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for
Courtney.
starting my day this
Help
way.
me thank Courtney. Thank you so much, Courtney. Awesome. So Courtney kind of highlighted how purpose is individual, but it's also collective. It starts to connect in. So hopefully you can feel that energy, right? Hopefully, I hope and pray that each of you are feeling that on the team you're on today. Like if you're not on that team today, do the personal work, because it'll start to guide and point you towards the right team and where it all wants to go. So if you had to fill out your purpose statement right now, how would you complete this sentence? I exist too, okay? So just as a reminder, it is the beginning. Purpose starts in the blue bubble, the light blue bubble. First, harness your purpose and lead yourself. If you haven't made it conscious, I would submit it's very hard for you to harness it. Does that make sense? I've got my purpose statement everywhere, okay? Everywhere. I want to know it. It's my North Star. I want to make sure that I'm harnessing it. Once you harness that, it brings the energy and the focus needed to really accelerate it into whatever your connection is to your business, your tribe, your nonprofit, your community, whatever it is. Then it makes that connection easier and more conscious. It's where the energy comes from. So claim your purpose, right? So here's just a few examples of some folks that I've worked with and some purpose statements that might inspire you. I exist to make you feel the world is a playground. If you know Enneagram, Santi is an Enneagram 7 like myself. It makes a lot of sense then, right? I exist to care for the caregivers through food. Katie's a wonderful entrepreneur I'm working with right now who supported her father when he was ill, and she was kind of the oldest at a very young age. So her significant event led her to a purpose that is now connecting very clearly into her business. She's here at the event. I exist to unlock trapped potential. Beautiful. I exist to catalyze purpose in others. Nick was my first executive coach. He unlocked my potential, and he's doing it for folks every single day in his job and his role. And what he's trying to do is make sure that he narrows out all the things that doesn't feed this. He's committed to really narrowing it down. I exist to bring clarity to uncertainty. I know these people, so it's making me smile. These folks are so good at this. It's something that's easy for them. It just flows. I exist to create stability that enables growth. This happens to be a CFO, okay? CFOs can have purpose statements too, believe it or not, okay? I exist to guide becoming. That's a beautiful one to me. I exist to co-pilot authorship. Now, a lot of these have been worked on for some time, right? It's a process. It's iterative. It's like carving the stone away to get to the statue of David, right? It's iterative. So wherever you start. Okay? I exist too. What do you love? What do you love deeply? Where do you show up and it's easy? Where is the flow? What are you being called to do? Where's the flow? What change does the world need to make? What do you get crazy about? What sets you off? What makes you angry? What makes you sad? What brings you joy? These are all the questions that you go through when you're identifying these things and pushing on it, okay? So just to round out the story on my dad actually beat cancer. He went on to live until about 4 or 5 years ago. He set a tone for me that is going to be with me forever. He was fired from his job at Eastern Airlines, if anybody remembers Eastern Airlines, And he followed his own purpose and started pulling on his strings or following his breadcrumbs, as Courtney mentioned. And it led him to grief counseling. He had some friends who were dealing with death of a loved one. And they basically pulled him aside and said, "You're really good at this. You're really good at this thing of bringing some comfort to me after the death of a loved one." So he started volunteering for hospice. That led to a master's degree in grief counseling. That led to him being a professor and teaching other people how to do grief counseling. He actually was a co-founder of a camp outside of Tampa that brought in hundreds of kids over the years that had lost one or both of their parents and helped children, help children deal with their grief. He's honored with the Volunteer of the Year Award. My mom and I went there last year to give it out in his name. Incredible man. Pulled on his strings, tapped into his purpose, made real impact in the world. Okay? So I'm proud to have known him. What about you? What about you? Are you nailing this? Are you doing the work to make it unconscious and conscious and to plug into the energy that comes from purpose and to bring that to whatever you're doing, whatever that community might look like? My company has created a Uncover Your Personal Purpose workbook. It's iterative. It's a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. You can download it at this site, scalepassion.com/ExpoWest. Reach out to me if I can support. But we're really excited about trying to, as a company, help leaders step into this. I exist to scale impact. My company exists to radically evolve capitalism. It starts with leaders who lean in on this stage 1, personal purpose. That's where it starts, okay? So if you're ready to start, grab the workbook, dig in. Hopefully you've gotten some value today, and I really invite you on this journey of purpose. Thank you so much today.